Now, the core of the Middle East problems is a conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. It's been poisoning the entire region and nurturing the roots of extremism and terrorism. This week, after 22 days of bombing in the Gaza Strip, a ceasefire has finally come. What follows now may be a period of relative quiet, but another flares up, perhaps worse than the latest, is a definite possibility. So before the next round erupts, it's time to think about who the winners and the losers are in this recent conflict.
On the first day of the ceasefire, 10-year-old Shireen and her younger sister Nevan made their way back to Jabalia camp in Gaza. They hoped to find some personal belongings hidden among piles of rubble.
They destroyed everything in the house. There is nothing left of the house we can stay in.
But the sisters were happy to find the torn pages of the Quran, and they should thank Allah they're still alive. More than 1,300 Gazans were killed in Israel's 3-week assault on Hamas. More than 5,000 were wounded. History repeats itself again and again in the Mideast. The civilians are always the biggest losers in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But beyond that, the lessons of who won and who lost this time are less clear.
We have fulfilled our primary goals. Hamas is badly beaten and weakened. It is also politically isolated and can show for no gains. We have achieved significant...
Ehud Barak is seen as the chief architect of the Operation Cast Lead in Gaza, and so gets much of the credit from the war. While the war drew an outpouring of international criticism, it had overwhelming support among Israelis. And Israel is about to embark on another brutal 3-week conflict, this time on the political battlefield. Support for Barak and his Labour Party rose dramatically during the military campaign. The Canadian newspaper, the Globe and Mail, said it seems unanimous. Ehud Barak is the war's biggest winner. But one analyst says Israel's outcome is a mixed bag.
Israel certainly was the military winner. It succeeded in dealing a hard blow to Hamas militants. But I have to say it lost politically, especially in the long run.
Israel has lost support from some important regional allies.
The government maintains all available options to evaluate ties with whoever, particularly Israel, and reconciliate due to higher national interests.
Jordan is one of only 2 Arab countries with peace treaties and full relations with Israel.
How is such a country which totally ignores and does not implement resolutions of the UN Security Council allowed to enter through the gates of the UN?
Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan's comments reflect growing anger in Turkey, Israel's best friend in the Muslim world, over the Gaza operation. And last Friday, despite the boycott of Egypt and Saudi Arabia, an Arab summit opened in Qatar. Qatar and Mauritania suspended contacts with Israel to protest the Gaza bloodshed. And it's worth noting that Iran's hardline president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, a top Hamas supporter, made a surprise appearance at the meeting.
Fearing the rising influence of Iran, many Arab countries in the Middle East turned to get close to Israel after the war in Iraq. But Gaza will reverse the trend. Israel's international image has been greatly damaged.
But Israel isn't the only political loser.
We want to protect Gaza. We want to protect our people there. We do not want genocide for our people.
Though Mahmoud Abbas's West Bank forces didn't suffer a single casualty, the Palestinian president may be the biggest loser coming out of this conflict. Ever since the war began, Abbas was busy negotiating to halt Israel's onslaught. But he faced damned if he does, damned if he doesn't prospects right from the start. The Palestinian National Authority president had to stand by while hundreds of his nominal constituents in Gaza were killed. Then, when West Bankers rose up to protest against what was happening to their fellow Palestinians in Gaza, Abbas felt compelled to ban and put down the demonstrations. In stark contrast, Hamas was seen as heroes among Palestinians.
After the failure of aggression, we announced our victory in Gaza, and the children of Gaza, our people, our nation, and free people all over the world.
After the ceasefire, a top Hamas leader claimed victory for his side. Hamas routed Fatah in a brief factional war in 2007 when it seized control of the Gaza Strip.
That's why I say it was a stupid war. Israel wants to weaken Hamas, but actually it's helped Hamas. In fact, we could see that long time ago it is Israel that created Hamas and helped it to get stronger. In 2002 and 2003, when Hamas had a very low support rate in Palestine, Yasser Arafat was considered the only national leader with unprecedented prestige. What did Israel do to him? Israel trapped Arafat in his office in Ramallah and humiliated him. These circumstances enabled Hamas to prove it was right and Arafat was wrong. Hamas then easily won the election in 2006.
There's no doubt Hamas took a beating, but it also achieved quite a bit. The war in Gaza has shifted world attention to this densely populated region, which has been virtually sealed off by Israel and Egypt. For the past year and a half, the tunnels have been one of the territory's main lifelines for 1.5 million Palestinians. They are also seen as key to keeping Hamas in power. It uses the tunnels to transport weapons. Many tunnel workers have been killed in Egyptian anti-smuggling operations, but they feel it's a small price to pay.
We have many victims in these tunnels. We hope God accepts them as martyrs who were supporting our people in this unjust siege put by Israelis and the Arabs on our people.
Hoping to protect its civilians from Palestinian militants, Israel began to build the apartheid wall, or separation barrier, in 2002. Now, for similar reasons, Israel put Gaza Strip under siege and vowed to oust Hamas. But it seems to be a Mideast irony that while Israel struggles to seal off and isolate its enemy, it finds itself more trapped and isolated by its neighbors.
Analysts say if Israel can't wipe out Hamas, the fight against it only helps prove the legitimacy of the party. Meanwhile, the international community has pledged all forms of support for reconstruction. Rebuilding depends on Hamas, even if the aid goes to Mahmoud Abbas and his Fatah party. Peace can only come after the reunion of the West Bank and Gaza and the opening of its border crossings. You're watching World Insight. Coming up next, global expectations for Barack Obama.